Second Commandment, number 2, you shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God. Or you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. Or when we look at Luther's explanation of what is this or what does this mean, Luther says we should fear and love God so that we do not use God's name wrongly for deceit or to practice magic or to curse or lie, but rather call upon God's name for help and in thanksgiving and praise. So, yeah, Second Commandment can be a big one. Lots of people may find themselves breaking big number 2 because might be just a little bit surprised. And OMG as a trend is a bad one for the Ten Commandments, right? God says, no, don't use my name when you're just a little bit surprised. If your phone falls 3 inches, that's not a reason to use my name. However, if there is an actual catastrophe and we find our lives falling down around us and we say, oh my God, that's okay. Because then in that situation, we're literally calling upon God for help. And that's good. The magic part in Luther's explanation, I don't really think we have to worry too much about that. Abracadabra is not actually an incantation upon God's name. But the taking an oath or swearing using God's name, that can come in a couple of different formats, right? There are a few curse words which do use God's name, which we need to try to stay away from. And also, when we take a vow, as in a marriage vow, or other vows where we might use God's name, we have to be very careful about that, making sure that it is, if it is an oath or a vow, that it is either under a worship ceremony or are we giving careful consideration to the fact that we're using God's name. God's name should have a lot of weight with it. God made the universe, and God's name is a name that is above all name. And under God's name, every knee should bow, right, as Scripture teaches us. So here's a couple funny stories to help drive all this home. First of all, I'll embarrass myself a little bit, right? The YouTube and internet is for embarrassing yourself. So when I was little, my mom would call me Boo Boo. Yeah, stop laughing. And it was also even funnier because I'm the third child. Yeah, my parents thought they were going to have 2. I was a surprise. And my mom would say, oh, but you were a delightful surprise. We loved you, and we were so glad that you were our new baby. Yeah, and I am very grateful for that. And I am grateful that I was loved. And I was very grateful for the fact that, my brother could pick on me, and that when my friends found out about such name, which I always hoped she would keep a secret, but I'm old enough now I can handle it. Anyway, when you are loved and cherished, you're given nicknames and pet names, right? And you probably have an embarrassing nickname, right? Everyone has some type of nickname or pet name. And so those can have a particular and special and enriching meaning. Now, where I'm getting with this is God has over 900 names, right? So if you're in your prayer and devotional life, you're finding that God is not particularly meaningful for you, there's plenty to choose from in the Bible. There's lots of ways that we as God's people can love God and use God's name in a really cool, loving way. A way that is not only just acceptable, but also really just touches upon the heart. And so do a search, flip through the Bible, go to your favorite Bible stories, pay attention to the fact and the ways that God's name is used in rightful ways and correct ways. Also, a funny story I'll close with. In my first parish, there was a delightful old couple that had a slightly unusual name. Their last name was a name with just 4 letters, E-A-S-H, and it was pronounced Aish. Now, when I first met them, I found this out quickly, and I learned how to pronounce it correctly because Ernie would not really take too kindly to his last name being pronounced incorrectly, particularly with those that knew him. It was kind of one of those where if you know me, you should know better. Don't say my name incorrectly if you know me. And so I learned to make sure that I said his name correctly. One time I was visiting with them and the phone rang. And at that time, there was a lot of telemarketing. And so he picked up the phone and was pretty gruff with the person because they mispronounced his name. And so he knew right away, they don't know me. If they can't pronounce my name correctly, they don't know me. They don't know who I am. And this is another correct understanding of God's name, right? We know God's personal name, according to the Bible, is Yahweh. And we know that that means that I am who I am and I will be who I will be. And God's name is kind of strange, and it's almost as if to say that there is no name like God's either. And so God really wants us to be very careful with God's name, because it is using God's name and knowing God closely enough that enables us to turn to God and ask for God to save us, right? For God to be that saving presence in our life. It is calling upon Jesus' name that enables us to be free. It is the power of the cross. It is the power of Jesus' name that we use for salvation. Names mean a lot.